Hi, I'm Ryan Farno and welcome to Food Chain. So today we're going to introduce you to the process of pickling seasonal vegetables. So what we have is some beautiful stuff we've picked up from local farmers markets and local farmers and producers here in upstate New York. We're in Long Island shooting, but I was excited to get these from Beacon Farmers Market this week. So we've got gorgeous red onions, mixed radishes, and you can see them uncut and cut. And then we have gorgeous beets that we're going to roast and peel, and we're going to pickle all of these, but we're also going to can them. And this big picture conversation that I'd like to bring to the table, literally and figuratively, with this program is to introduce folks to the practice of where are we sourcing our food, how do we prepare our food, and then what is a sustainable model for us being able to take all of this, store it in a pantry, keep it over the winter, understand what seasonality is, and kind of have this sense of recognition and connection to our local producers. And we're going to talk about the farms these came from and their missions and what they're about. And then we're going to kind of encourage you guys to kind of engage in these old and traditional practices and bring more kind of fun and interest and flavor to what you do in your own kitchen. So stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to pack these sterilized jars and we're going to start to create these brines and explain those to you guys in detail. Welcome back. So we're going to pickle these gorgeous local vegetables, but we need to talk about how that happens and what the process is. So today we're going to do a traditional vinegar-based brine, but we're going to introduce you to ideas of fermentation pickling, which doesn't have vinegar, which is going to be a lacto fermentation process that takes salt and water and time. And the natural lactobacillus bacteria that's present on all these vegetables is going to be what provides the acid and the depth of flavor later. But the fermenting process takes longer. So we're going to tease you with that, but we're going to basically deal with a hot brine that we've already got steaming here and a cold brine. But we want to talk about the key components of what makes a great brine is the kinds and quality of vinegar that you're going to use to create this. So we've got a really gorgeous apple cider vinegar probiotic with a mother. That means that all of these vinegars are born of fermentation to begin with. So, but the flavor profiles are different. For something that's more richer and sweet, I love the apple cider vinegars and the rice vinegars. For a neutral flavor, just for more acidity, the traditional distilled white vinegars are great. But the key is ratios, like how intense do you want your pickle? How strong do you want it to be? And then also the vinegar is really good for your gut health, but it's also, you have to make sure you're aware of the acid percentages in different vinegars and making sure that for the sake of food preservation and longevity of storage, just do a little research on your vinegar before you use it. So we're using a couple different kinds today. So our hot brine is for our beets and our onions. And this is going to be basically a 3-to-1, almost 2-to-1 water to vinegar ratio. So it's going to be a much more intense pickle because we're packing our ball jars really tight with the beets and the onions, and the amount of liquid that you're actually going to pour over is going to be just enough. You want a more intense brine. For our pickled radishes, we're using a rice vinegar, which is going to be a little sweeter, and we have a little bit of garlic in here, but we're using rice vinegar at about a 4-to-1 ratio of water to vinegar. So it's not as acidic, but the real key for preserving your food is your salt and what's your salinity level and what kinds of salts you use. I tend to stay away from any processed iodized salt. I mean, sodium chloride is sodium chloride, but the uniqueness of something like the sea salts from Berlin or a kosher salt, the coarseness of the salt will affect the ratios that you want. So for my standard brine recipe is for a traditional cold pack brine with white distilled vinegar is 8.5 cups of water to 2.25 cups of vinegar. And then in that volume, you're going to add 1/2 cup of your pickling salt. But the more coarse it is, the more you need to increase the volume. The finer it is, the less. But again, stick your finger in it. I will lean over and just grab a quick measuring cup. You want that punch. If you don't get a real strong acid saltiness, your vinegar, your brine isn't going to be strong enough to impart that really lovely flavor to your produce. So we'll tease you with the lacto-fermentation process later, because the key with lacto-fermenting without vinegars is that you have to have a salinity level between 3 and 4% in order to produce the right environment to ferment safely. And that's a really key thing we want to talk about, is making sure that we follow our recipes and get our ratios correct with these kinds of things when we're preserving and canning food. So when we come back, we're going to pack these jars, and then we're going to prep them to be put into our hot water canning bath that we're going to drop them for 15 minutes at a low simmer. And then that is going to ensure that we can store these pickles all through the whole season. So stay tuned. So welcome back. So we've got our onions prepped. We've talked about our brines. One thing that I need to make sure that you understand too is if you're going to sweeten a brine, because the brine for our beets and onions is going to include some kind of sweetener to brighten that brine flavor. So I meant to mention, we've got these gorgeous cane sugar, organic regenerative farm practice Florida crystals I love. That's one of the brands that we'll work with. But if we're going to sweeten anything, but also a really good local honey is super awesome, healthy, good for you. We'll talk more about honeys in future episodes, because honey is something that's local to your environment. The flora and fauna that the bees actually consume to create the honey in your region can actually be much more beneficial to you. So if you're going to eat honey and use honey in cooking, look for local apiaries and local honey producers so that you can get the health benefits of a honey produced near where you live. But what we want to do first with the red onions, these are gorgeous from, I think they're from Titusville farm up near the Hudson River Valley. We want to rinse these sliced onions really quickly because we want to take down some of that pungentness of these rich onions. So we're just going to rinse those for a second. While those are soaking, to pull some of that out, we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about our canning setup. So really lovely ball pickling funnel. Great way to pack your jars, keeps from making a mess, easy to pour the brine in. You definitely want to have some kind of a pickling funnel, just something easy to use. Now, really important, behind us we've got gorgeous pickling tongs. We need these to lift our jars in and out of our hot water bath. So this has been prepped, it's come to a simmer. You want to have, you can see it going really beautifully. With the rack, it's even cool to the touch right now. This can hold 7 pints or 6 quarts, depending on how you're gonna do it. And we're going to prep this to drop a couple jars in. It's a 15-minute boiling time, but we wanna talk about the correct way to pack a jar. These have been sanitized and sterilized and ready to go. Our rings and lids have also been sterilized, so we're set. We're gonna put our pickling tongs back by that. Now we can take our onions and we're letting them rinse. We're just going to take some of that pungent flavor out and kind of brighten them up a little bit. It doesn't really do anything except mellow the onions out. And I think that's important, because if you pickle onions, some varieties, they can be so strong even with the brine that they're going to be difficult to deal with. So now we just want to pack this and leave about a ½ inch of headspace. Always for hot water bath canning, we need a little bit of air between your product and the seal. What we're doing is hand tightening very loosely, not very loosely. You want to hand tighten to where it doesn't twist, but you don't want to tighten it too much. What's going to happen when we do the water bath canning is we're literally bringing the contents of the jar up to a boil, which forces the air out of that headspace slowly. And then as it cools, it creates a vacuum. The vacuum is the key to making sure that you get a good seal and can preserve your vegetables up to 3 to 6 months. Once we've canned this, it can sit in a pantry unrefrigerated or on the shelf in your cabinet for several months. And do more research on it. But in future episodes, we're going to talk about this bad boy, because we're going to break out the pressure canner. And then that takes it to another level, because with water bath canning, pay attention to your local cottage food laws, but high acid foods are what are generally legal or allowed to do at home and to resell for canning methods. So for all of our pickles with acid-based vinegars, we can can them with just a hot water bath canner, which goes 212, 200 boiling point. A pressure canner is going to increase the temperature of the canning process to over 250, 220, 230 degrees, which will kill any kind of extraneous microbe life in your food. So those pressure canned vegetables don't have to have high acidity. They will be cooked to the point where they're free of any, dangerous microbial like bacteria or any other things that could be in there. And then those can stay shelf stable for months as well. So we're gonna pack our onions in our container, and then we're going to add, and it's up to you to decide. You can use a mandolin. I love to cut things by hand. I gifted myself some beautiful Shun knives this week for this show, just for fun. We'll talk a lot about the equipment you use and why it's important to maintain it and how you maintain it in future episodes. But I really think that, this is a lifetime investment. The knives and the equipment that you use that you're going to cook with are something that's really important when you start thinking about how you set your kitchen up. So for an example, we've pushed this down enough to keep about a 1/2 inch of headspace right below the shoulder of this pint ball jar, right? So I'm actually gonna take a little bit out of this, and then we're simply gonna take our funnel and we're gonna pour this. Now, depending on the container, we just want this to come up to the shoulder. We also want to make sure that we keep the heads, the rings and lids need to be sterilized, but we want to make sure that we keep the top of the glass. So a clean cotton towel, we're going to wipe this down. We want to make sure we're going to use, just to make sure you push this in. You want to get all the air out of the jar, and we can probably add just a touch more brine. So I'm going to come back with my ladle and just really carefully, we're just going to add a little bit more. And just be conscious of this. You want to make sure you keep at least a 1/2 inch or so of headspace, but different pickling methods. The ball canning book that comes with ball canning systems is a great resource. It has a lot of great recipes in it, but it gives you the breakdown of everything. So we've wiped this down and cleaned this up, and we're not gonna tighten this more than just as much as I can it slips, finger tight. Don't tighten it tight. You need the air to come out of this when you hot water bath can it, so that it creates a vacuum as it cools. So when it's boiling, it's actually going to be pushing the air out of the jar. When it cools, it creates a vacuum. So we're gonna set this really gently right into the center, and then we can use this. We're gonna drop this down. Now what's really important to understand is that you need to have at least 1 inch of water above the top of your jar. So as you're working with, and displacement's the key. So if you put 7 jars in, the water level is going to go way up. If you only put a couple jars in, the water level won't go up as much. So just be cognizant of what you're dropping and what the water level is. And it's totally fine if you drop your jars and they're not submerged completely. Just grab a pot and add another few cups until it gets 1 inch above the tops of the jars. And then just crank it up and let it come to a simmer. It doesn't matter how long it's in there, but it has to boil at a low simmer for 15 minutes from beginning to end for it to be canned properly. So make sure you're good with your time and make sure you know that it's boiling as you're preparing it. So we're gonna lid this, we're gonna turn it up, and we're gonna set a 15-minute timer. And then when we come back, we're gonna talk about our bullet turbo ovens and how we're gonna roast our beets to prepare them for pickling. Welcome back, and I'm also excited to introduce you guys to the Turbo Chef, the bullet convection ovens that we've just started using. Great pizza oven, small scale, really quick, fast, great for also roasting vegetables. So we've got these gorgeous beets from Over Creek Farm up in upstate New York, and we've roasted them at 400 degrees for an hour. And what we want to do is make sure we steam them so that when we're done, you could peel them. So this is going to be our gorgeous pickled roasted beets that we're going to prep later.
Crisp and flawless cooking. Turbo Bullet is designed for rapid, even heating, making them perfect for achieving golden brown crispiness in dishes like salmon croquettes. Their advanced technology minimizes cooking time while preserving flavor and texture.
And welcome back, and our timer has just gone off, and we're about to pull our pickles from our canning liquid. This is the fun part. You grab your rack, check it out. Even when it's hot, we can bring this straight over, just like that. And now we need to use the tongs to pull these out. Now you're saying, what do I do with these pickles when I'm done? Well, this is the fun part. So we've got our gorgeous radishes from Titusville Farm that we've just pickled with rice wine vinegar brine with garlic. And then we have our gorgeous pickled red onions from Ober Creek Farm. And we've got red wine vinegar, cider vinegar, salt, sugar. And our Florida Crystals is gorgeous organic regenerative practice sugar. We also, this is our surprise, we've got chameleon sourdough bread from Brooklyn. And we have our pickled beets and our pickled onions that we've already got prepped. And to finish this off is, what do I do with my pickles? What we've put together for you is a gorgeous beet toast. So, chameleon sourdough, toasted with olive oil, beets, chev, spinach, honey, sprinkle of salt to finish. This is a phenomenal way to eat your beets, and it beats avocados all day. But I'm excited for the opportunity to show you some of these things and introduce you some traditional food preservation methods. The pickle is like the core of a taste profile condiment that adds so much to so many different things, but you can also keep them in your pantry for months to come. I'm Ryan Farno, and thank you for joining us on Food Chain. I hope you enjoy or dive into your pickling and canning experience, but if you need, look for the recipes. Check us out online on our Instagram at fstop_farm or on Facebook at fstopfarm. Thank you. We'll see you soon.